So this paper examines the role of labor and community left populist organizing in the Tax Amazon campaign based in Seattle, Washington. As a case study within a larger project that examines both right-wing and left-wing populism in urban North America, the paper reflects on the dynamics of resistance to corporate power through labor and community-based left populist organizing. Through the study, we ask more broadly, what role did labor and community coalitions play in shaping the emergence of a broader left populist politics at the municipal scale in Seattle? To what extent does the movement create the basis for new forms of labor organizing in the face of declining unionization and for the growing numbers of service economy workers who lack union representation? What is the role of labor organizations and broader labor movements in both contesting and supporting populism? So through the presentation, we comment on the conference theme of experimentation by identifying both promise and contradictions in the adoption of left populist strategies in the Tax Amazon campaign. We also connect to the theme of this panel on union narratives by commenting on the presence of populist narratives in the campaign. The project is framed through the interconnections of rising populism, the politics of austerity, and the crisis of labor. And these processes are all part of the context of left populist organizing in Seattle. Very briefly, in terms of populism, we understand this as a discursive strategy that includes broad appeals to the interests of quote unquote the people and the threats created by quote unquote dangerous others. While populism is prevalent in contemporary politics in some parts of the world, we see its presence as being uneven, incomplete, and at times contradictory. In the project, we previously published on how we approach these interconnected processes, so I'm not going to elaborate further at this point. When we started the project, we initially planned to study the $15 Now campaign, and we see an image from this campaign outlined on the slide. We hadn't anticipated the Tax Amazon campaign when we initiated the project, and we didn't learn of it until the research was underway. Emerging from the $15 Now campaign, the Tax Amazon campaign brought together labor and community organizations to pressure Seattle City Council to push for a corporate tax to generate funding for affordable housing initiatives. The Tax Amazon campaign was met with resistance from the local business community, as well as from some of the local trade unions. Being a leading corporate figure in the opposition to the tax, Amazon emerged as a key target of left populist campaign. Now, the Seattle case and the Tax Amazon campaign itself offer a way to examine relations between new configurations of work, new forms of labor organizing, and the specificities of urban-based left populist resistance. Through the formation of a labor community coalition with strong left populist leanings, as well as the rise of socialist-oriented municipal councilor Kshama Sawant, these were instrumental in the success of this campaign. In terms of the research methodologies, this involved two field research trips to Seattle, Washington, April 2018 and June 2019, during which interviews were conducted in person, interviews involving representatives from labor organizations, representatives from community social justice organizations, and Seattle City Council. An additional interview was completed over Skype following the trips. A third research trip had been planned for the subsequent spring, but of course was interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we do have tentative plans to continue the research in the future, but we haven't connected with that yet. Okay, the Amazon, I'm not going to say much about Amazon. We're going to watch our time here. It's a big company. It has a global presence. Its headquarters are based in Seattle, and so it becomes the major figure in this campaign. And Rawan is now going to talk through the timeline for the Tax Amazon campaign.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, the Tax Amazon campaign was sort of initially propelled by grassroots political coalition of both organized labor and community activists. They demanded that the state launch a task force to provide evidence-based knowledge to support the goals of this movement. This coalition, initially named Trump Proof Seattle, was born in the aftermath of Trump's 2016 victory in the presidential election and they convened around local action on tax reform, right? And in a state, obviously, the most regressive taxation system in the country. So the left-wing grassroots section of this Trump-proof coalition later became Housing for All, which then launched a political campaign to address homelessness through attacks on large businesses. Although their first proposal failed in council, it was in the aftermath of this defeat in November 2017 that council voted unanimously to commission proposals to tackle this homelessness crisis. And the task force report recommended that an employee hours tax, basically a progressive tax mechanism that, unlike sales and property taxes, is levied on large businesses and corporations, not on the workers' incomes, be designed to generate revenue for public use in order to have to begin to have a minimally tangible impact on Seattle's housing affordability crisis. And of course, after much back and forth on the right amount that would be agreeable to Amazon, the bill was passed in May 2018, which led Amazon to basically threaten to halt construction of its downtown office tower, and with it, of course, take away a number of construction jobs in the city. In addition to pulling construction plans, Amazon also led a coalition of businesses in Seattle who together formed a campaign in opposition to the tax, which they called the No Tax on Jobs campaign. And they wanted to put a referendum on the ballot to repeal the tax. The No Tax on Jobs campaign kind of quickly escalated in tenor and soon morphed into a broader criticism of Seattle City Council and its members, and successfully kind of shepherded the anger of hundreds of city residents, particularly, the homeowners, not in my backyard type of residents, over homelessness into anger at the city council itself. So in June 2018, the Seattle Council, after this pressure, actually repealed the tax. This bitter fight culminated in the launch of a corporate offensive by Amazon to essentially capture city council by directly pumping $1.5 million into campaigns for pro-corporate and pro-Amazon candidates, with specific attention to unseating, of course, council member Kshama Sawant. Amazon's efforts, however, were unsuccessful. Sawant was victorious against Amazon's candidate, and the struggle to tax Amazon was immediately revived. So this newly invigorated Tax Amazon grassroots campaign or movement, led by the Socialist Alternative, of which Kshama Sawant is a member, involved a broad coalition of workers, community organizations, and unions, as well as rank and file Seattle Democrats. And the movement's message, I feel like you should say that, the tax Amazon and big business, not working people. So initial deliberations by this broad Democratic grassroots coalition resulted in the adoption of a dual strategy, fighting through city council to pass a large tax on these large corporations, coupled with the pressure of a ballot initiative that would emerge directly from the movement. These two proposals would target the top 3 corporations in Seattle. We're talking 800 businesses, measured by the size of their payroll, and both measures or proposals exempt NGOs, grocery stores, and public employers. The proposal that moved forward in council was dubbed Jumpstart Seattle, and it passed with a veto-proof majority in July 2020. So as Mark mentioned earlier, we understand populism as this open discursive framework, open in the sense that it's not defined by a particular ideological orientation. It may be immobilized in left and or right-wing movements. In this presentation, populist discourse at its core aims to sort of construct divisions between the people and the elite, focusing on how the people are threatened by this dangerous other. Right, often these elites include those with an institutional basis. So Laclau emphasized that populism is a process whereby the people express their dissatisfaction with the dominant powers through a discursive project that finds empty signifiers to articulate a variety of unanswered demands. The notion of empty signifiers is useful just to see how the campaign adopted populist narratives to frame its cause. My God, 5 minutes. Okay. And so Seattle's prosperity, right, like the tech boom era, also helped like create this context of abundance, which provides left actors or organizers with a unique opportunity to point to this elite, right, against which the people's interests could be defined. We see this as a form of populist experimentation in the construction of the campaign's narrative. So, you know, Jeff Bezos and Amazon became a perfect embodiment of the elite, whose deep involvement in local politics evidenced, you know, in their collaboration with both like private corporate elite and the political establishment type of elite. And so here, you know, as one interview stated, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially like this multiracial working class that we had here have more in common with each other than they do with Jeff Bezos. Of course, the tax Amazon campaign was also demonstrates tensions and contradictions that may emerge through populist strategies. So pass it back to Mark for that.
Okay, a little bit more before getting to tensions and contradictions. I'll say a little bit more about the framing or the construction of the people through this populist lens that was emerging through the campaign. In constructing a commonality of interests as united against the so-called elite, as Rawan was talking about, organizers in the campaign also emphasized the multiple dimensions of precariousness to highlight the interconnectedness of struggles. And so the impact of Amazon on the community was seen in relation to a wide array of transformations occurring in Seattle, related to homelessness, low income, low wages, job insecurity, and also a very strong racialized element to this. And through this, we can see, again, here's another longer quote that we won't read through in full, but signals to the ways in which this populist framing of the people was being constructed around a variety of interconnected interests. Now, also, as Rawan mentioned, there were a number of tensions and contradictions that emerged in and through the campaign around the tax Amazon strategy. Despite the ways in which a left populist approach to organizing generated a broad basis of support in the community, tensions and contradictions within the campaign were highly evident. Our research began during the presidency of Donald Trump, a period during which the time of right-wing populism was in its ascendancy in the United States as elsewhere. The labor movement was not immune to these tendencies, and some unions and unionists gravitated towards right-wing populism and right-wing populists. One interview participant explained, and we'll see a short version of a much longer and richer quote here. And I'll just read the phrase at the top, which I think captures or hints at, I think, a number of these tensions. Inside the man trades, the male unions, the membership started to, be seduced by right-wing populism. And this is a quote from a woman who was an activist within the local labor council, talking about some of the tensions with the building trade unions. Perhaps as an outgrowth of this, or reflecting longstanding patterns of business unionism and conservatism, some unions openly opposed the Tax Amazon campaign and sided with the anti-tax efforts. This position was notable within the Building and Construction Trades Council, who feared the loss of jobs would affect workers' livelihood when Amazon threatened to leave. Construction workers stood in opposition to Kshama Sawant at a rally in front of the Amazon headquarters when Amazon, in our estimation, blackmailed the city with halting construction projects. And again, thank you. Perfect. We have another quote here. I will not read it, but it captures these tensions. So in conclusion, this presentation points to the potential for innovative labor organizing through left populist strategies to contest the interconnections of corporate power and urban precarity. Such organizing must move beyond the limitations created by post-war models of workplace-based and workplace-focused trade unionism. It must build on principles of radical social movement unionism to connect with a wide array of community struggles, building movements in solidarity with other organizations engaged in related struggles. Left populism may provide a strategic orientation and framing for this kind of organizing. But the research also points to possible tensions and contradictions that may arise through labor struggles in the populist moment. And in particular, in our case, these were manifested in competing interests within different segments of the organized working class. In Seattle, this was most evident in the opposition of building trades unions to the corporate tax. And we want to conclude, though, with a quote that we found, a very powerful statement from one of the participants in the interview project, or the interview process, who captures the power of the moment within Seattle. Despite the tensions and contradictions, there were some breakthroughs in this campaign, and this quote points to the directions that they saw emerging. And so I distinguish the labor movement from the union movement. Unions, workplace unions, representing about 10% of workers in this country, but working people organize themselves in other ways too, through churches and faith communities, through worker centers, through healthcare coalitions, through retiree groups, through Black Lives Matter. And our job is to see the labor movement as embracing all these different organizations as partners in building a new society. So thank you, and we look forward to questions and discussion.